Hello there, and welcome to the Devious Dozen presentation. In this video, you are going to learn about 12 archetypal traits, these unconscious parts of who you are that are the result of your deepest drives and desires, and how these 12 archetypes have both positive and negative traits, and how these archetypes can work against you and lead you down the pathway of self-abusive and self-sabotaging behaviours. I want to begin this presentation with two quotes. The first quote is, "The mind divided within itself cannot stand with integrity." This means that when a mind is compartmentalized or fragmented into different mindsets, where someone is continually in 2 minds, 3 minds, 4, 5, 6, or even more minds, that is when the thought processes are incoherent and inconsistent. And this results in self-doubt. There is a lack of certainty and conviction in who you be and what you do. The second quote is, "The mind divided against itself cannot live with harmony." This means that when the mind has thoughts that are opposed to each other, there is inner conflict, polarization, and anxiety where the mind is pushing and pulling against itself and unable to find peace and balance. The importance of why I shared those two quotes with you will become apparent as we dig into this presentation. Both of these quotes are based upon the as within, so without principle, which means whoever you are within, whatever the state of your mind is, this will be the focus and energy that you project outwards. The energy that you project is then the reality that you manifest. Therefore, if what's going on inside your mind is conflicted and there is no integrity and harmony in the way you think, this will manifest as a problematic and incoherent experience of reality. Which brings me to the next point, which is, what are the Devious Dozen? Not who, but what are they? Well, the Devious Dozen is a catchy title that I've given to summarize these 12 different archetypes. They are psychological embodiments, these 12 unique characteristic traits that have individual mindsets and behavioural patterns, which is to say that each of the 12 archetypes have unique personas and attributes and certain ways of thinking about life and doing things. The Devious Dozen also have desires with agendas. They are driven by impulse to achieve specific outcomes. They are driven by a desire to escape pain. So that could be mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, relational, even situational pain. And they are also driven by desire to seek out pleasure. And there are various ways that we get our pleasures served by these 12 different archetypes. It could be through transcendent substances like alcohol, illicit and prescriptive drugs, entertainment, or empowerment for achievement and success. But the bottom line, the end goal, the agenda of each archetype is to get those desires met. So to recap, the Devious Dozen are 12 unique archetypes with characteristic traits that service your primal drives, desires, urges, needs, wants, and must-haves in all the different aspects of your life. Which then begs the question, who are the Devious Dozen? The Devious Dozen are known by their archetypal names as follows. You have the fantasist, the escape artist, the false victim, the sadist, the defeatist, the exhibitionist, the thrill seeker, the trickster, the imposter, the jester, the sycophant, and the perfectionist. Now, just by me giving you their names alone will indicate to you what kind of archetypal characters they are. So let's consider the fantasist. For example, the fantasist is an archetypal character that has the traits of fantasizing over the things that you desire. This could be fantasizing over the fame, the fortune, luxury items, holidays, sex, and it goes on. Now let's choose another archetype from the list. The sadist, for example. Now that's an archetypal character that has the traits of enjoying adversity, pain and suffering. And yes, we all have within us a part of the psyche that likes pain. Some of us thrive when dealing with hardship, some more than others, I hasten to add. Now if we consider the jester, for example, the jester is an archetypal character that represents the comedian, the performer within you, where there is a desire to entertain people and enjoy laughter and fun. So it's pretty straightforward what the archetypes are by their names alone. You will learn more about the Devious Dozen as you watch the following tutorials where I give a full breakdown, profile and analysis of each different archetype. But for now, let's discuss the fundamental attributes of each archetype, and I will refer to the fantasist archetype as the example to help us understand the attributes. Also, the Devious Dozen archetypes have both positive and negative attributes, which means they are characteristic traits with the potential to do it right or get it wrong. Therefore, they can be the reason you do good things or bad things. They can be the emotions that enhance or diminish the quality of your life. They can be the thoughts that make you feel depressed or joyful. They can be the behaviours that take you further away or closer to your ideals. Therefore, would you not agree that it's very important to know how these archetypes, these different mindsets, are controlling the way you behave? I think so. You see, when the archetypes are being utilised for positive outcomes, they will become powerful parts of your psychology that will advance your self-development and help you to achieve a life that you truly desire. Unfortunately, for most people, these archetypes have become a detrimental impact on their life, whereby the archetypes have become the reason why they, knowing or unknowingly, develop self-sabotaging and self-abusive behaviours. What are self-sabotaging and self-abusive behaviours? Self-sabotage is when we deliberately damage, limit, obstruct or destroy even a part of who we are or an aspect of our life. When self-sabotaging who we are preventing a certain aspect of our character from expressing and developing itself. When self-sabotaging an aspect of our life, we are preventing a certain experience from taking place. Being self-abusive is when we engage with bad, immoral and sinful behaviours that result in some type of loss, harm and injury, where we are doing things that are toxic, depraved and degenerative. But here's the snag, and we'll delve into it a little bit deeper as we get further into this presentation. But for now, our self-sabotaging and self-abusive traits, or negative traits if you will, are not always so obvious for two reasons. Number one, our negative traits have by repetition become a normalized part of who we are and what we do. Number two, our negative traits are being disguised as positive rewards. So, let's use the fantasist as the example to explain how an archetype can be self-sabotaging and self-abusive. The fantasist could be a part of you with strong desires for junk food. By junk food, I mean all of the bad stuff that tastes good, right? The burgers, the pizzas, the sodas, the sweets, the whatever it is that makes you salivate at the prospect of feeling good. And if you fantasize about junk food and indulge more often than not, where you say have this 80% junk food to 20% health food ratio, it's likely that you have an unhealthy food habit. And because you are what you eat, it is highly likely that over time you will cultivate a junk body that has junk thoughts and junk emotions. However, If you are familiarized to eating junk food and you see it as a positive reward, a treat, then you are blind to seeing that you actually have bad nutrition. Bad nutrition is to eat processed, nutrition void, chemicalized, high in trans fats, over salted and over sugary foods that are pumping your body with acidic toxicity. And that there would be the self-abusive element. In terms of having a junk food habit, it's highly likely that you are not fit, that you are overweight, and that you probably have the disease of obesity, which could lead to organ, gland, heart and artery disorders, disease and failure. Therefore, you are sabotaging your potential to be healthy, have vitality and be physically strong and attractive. But here's the deal. The fantasist part of you would be getting a pleasurable and rewarding sensation from the tasty and comforting junk food, whereby the instant gratification and pleasure outweighs the long-term downside, where you've become so familiar with the expectance and convenience of rewarding junk food that to change your eating patterns would be this massive lifestyle change, and plus you stand to lose out on that nice, delicious food. Changing the diet is one of the hardest things to do. You have to literally go against decades of programming and conditioning. And not only that, and this bit I really want you to pay attention to, if you fantasize about your favorite comfort foods all the time, then you will have these powerful drives and desires to get the food that you want. And these drives and desires would always override your ability to choose otherwise. So, right now, the most important thing that you need to know is that the self-sabotaging and self-abusive traits of the Devious Dozen, the 12 archetypes, and there are many, is the reason why you cannot break through bad habits to become the best version of you and achieve the most ideal life conditions and outcomes. It is these archetypes with their drives and desires that hold you back and pull you down. Which brings me to this. Why are the Devious Dozen devious? They are devious because they operate by psychological subterfuge. What does that actually mean? It means they are shadow aspects of the self that operate beyond your awareness, and they do so with underhand tactics and ulterior motives in which to obtain and satisfy their desired outcomes. In other words, you, for the most part, are unaware of the underlying reasons why you behave the way you do, and unaware of the manipulative way that these archetypes control your thinking. That's because each one of the 12 archetypes are unconscious sub-personas. Let's unpack what unconscious sub-persona means. Sub-personas are individual aspects of your overall persona. Sub-personas are different mindsets that are compartmentalized. Sub-personas operate with 4 distinct qualities. They are subconscious. They reside inside the unconscious aspects of the mind and therefore operate beyond your self-awareness, which means they take autonomous and involuntary control over the way you think and behave without you being aware of it. They are substitutions, which means each archetype is an alternative trait. They are alters that have small but significant character changes. They switch on and off when triggered by conditioned responses to key stimulus. They are substandards. The traits can have low standards and degenerative qualities with problematic styles of thinking and behaving. They are subversions of who you are, with lower self-ideals that undermine your true nature and virtue. The takeaway from this so far is, whilst the 12 different archetypes remain as unknown sub-personas within your psychology and conditioned as a dominant part of your unconscious aspect, you have no ability to control or moderate their behaviours, which means that they have free rein over the mechanisms of your mind. Your mind is being controlled and directed by their impulsive desires. And since I'm someone that likes to dive deep on a subject, let's further explore how the devious doesn't control you with impulsive desire. So how do the devious doesn't affect your behaviour? Let's look at what it means to experience a state shift. Each one of the devious dozen archetypes is a sub-persona that's positioned at the backstage of your mind, primed to react to a specific stimulus. When triggered by a specific stimulus, a particular sub-persona will take center stage inside your mind to express its characteristic traits. You will start to memorize, imagine, and think in accordance to the traits of that archetype, where there's a signature performance that you have, and your mind-body animates towards a specific outcome. These biopsychological state shifts are similar to the impulsive urge that one has when hungry for food, like when your mind has become utterly possessed with nothing but strong desires, vivid images and thoughts that are fixated upon what, where and when will I eat. And once that desired outcome has been satisfied, in this case you have eaten, your mind then shifts into a different state and moves on to the next task. So if we again consider the fantasist as the example, whenever you state shift into the traits of the fantasist, your mind will be taken over and possessed with nothing but rampant imaginations for the things that you strongly desire in that moment, which could be the fantasy over food, shopping, a car, gaming, money, or sex, anything that you typically fantasize over. Whatever it is that you fantasize about doing or having, your mind will be in a fantasy mode, and with that, you will have a strong urge to act out the fantasy. So, how else do the devious doesn't affect you? They are fragmented traits. The devious dozen traits are fragmented parts of your psychology, which means that they are separated off from each other by a wall of amnesia. There's no memory link between each different part of you, where each different archetype is unaware that the other archetype exists. And we do unconsciously flip between different modes of being and doing without even realizing it. We do often take on different characteristic roles when we engage with different tasks that require a different mindset and skill. We do become a different person from one moment or situation to the next, and without realizing that we do. The fragmented mind is why people can develop a subtle to severe personality disorder, where one's thinking, mannerisms and behaviour are fickle in nature and frictional in temperament, which means that we can be changeable, unpredictable and unstable in the way that we think, feel and act. To have a mind that is fragmented with differing traits is to have an inconsistent mind. The inconsistent mind is to have different characteristic traits that have irreconcilable differences. The devious dozen are archetypes that have opposing and competing desires. They have incompatible values and beliefs, which is to have a conflicted psychology. The mind that is conflicted is pushing and pulling in different directions and clashing with opposite views towards the same subject. When a mind continually experiences inner conflict, self-doubt and anxiety, there can be this inability to be single-minded, certain, coherent and confident in one particular direction in life, where one's relationship with reality can often be incongruent, inconsistent and wayward, which makes for a problematic lifestyle. Also, when the mind is doubtful and conflicted, communications with others tend to be unpredictable and unreliable, and this causes relationships to fluctuate and falter between suspiciousness, distrust and uncertainty. When unconscious to the fact that we have altering characteristic traits and opposed desires and views, we are hypocritical and contradictive with behaviour. We can make strong claims and bold moves that will soon be violated. In fact, the differing characteristics within a person are well noted in society by the terms split personality, two-faced, within two minds, acting crafty, backstabber, and double standards, which are the labels to define someone that is devious in nature. Devious in nature is to always be deflecting and deviating in behaviour, where one can never stay on a straight and narrow pathway with one thing and for too long. There is always a different drive or a new desire that will sabotage one from being consistent. So now that you understand the what and who the devious dozen are, you now need to know the how. How have the negative traits of the devious dozen come to be? Why do we engage with self-abusive and self-sabotaging behaviours more often than less? Why do we struggle to remain on course, remain true to ourselves and remain true to others? Let me start by saying that the Devious Dozen archetypes are overcompensations for our underlying inferiorities. These inferiorities stem from past life experiences. These inferiorities relate back to moments and events that took place way back in early childhood. Our underlying inferiorities, and we all have them, are the parts of oneself that went unactualized, unnourished, undeveloped, unfulfilled, unaccepted, unloved, and uncared for as we journeyed through life. This means those underlying inferiorities have been repressed into the shadows of the unconscious aspects to become the shadow aspects of the self. The Devious Dozen are the shadow aspects of who we are. They are archetypal traits with lower self attributes. What does this actually mean? For the most part, the 12 archetypes that you are soon to learn more about are unconscious and therefore uncontrollable parts of who you are, because you can't control that about yourself to which you are not aware of about yourself. And with the Devious Dozen archetypes, you are acting unconsciously. They are undeveloped, impulsive and unrestrained with their thoughts and actions. They can be wild, juvenile and tempestuous in nature. And because they lack the wisdom of better judgment, they have a jump before you contemplate mentality. The 12 archetypes are most reactive when you are trying to escape from painful experiences or seeking pleasurable comforts. They are usually triggered to react with fearful desperation and lustful gratification. The problem with these two lower self reactions is that they take you down the path of least resistance to the quickest outcome, regardless of the immediate or long-term consequences, doing whatever it is necessary to service your desires. The unbridled desires of these lower self archetypes is why we often fall short of virtuous standards and preferred ideals. When fully corrupted with sinful desire, these shadow archetypes become the inner demons that take over, possess, and terrorize the mind with carnal appetites and vice. And look, we are very problematic creatures once we've succumbed to the 7 deadly sins of envy, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, sloth, and wrath. When corrupted and convoluted with sinful vice, the mind-body has transfused into a demonic state. Now, I appreciate that demonic is a strong word with evil connotations. However, the root, which means the actual meaning of demonic, is D, which means take away, and monic, the highest degree equal to 1. Therefore, we could say that the devious doesn't have demonic qualities because they are compartmentalized. They are different parts of the mind that are divorced and isolated from each other. They can be the reason we are psychologically incoherent and disordered, where one is unable to experience the inner peace and wholesomeness of atonement. Atonement means to be at one with mind. Not only that, when riddled with unhealthy desires and impure thought processes, the rationale and moral has been undermined. We can operate from a lower self mentality and engage with gross misconduct, wrongdoing and immorality more often than we think and realize it. That's because the lower self traits of the devious dozen can self-deceive us into thinking that our substandard behaviors are normal and acceptable, where we've become our own worst enemy. The devious dozen archetypes can bring out the very worst in us because they are survival-based, narcissistic, immature and impulsive. They act with impromptu and act without empathy, not thinking twice about the actions required to service their selfish impulses, where the end justifies the means. And it can get quite ugly. When both etiquette and cooperation is not a viable means to satisfy their appetites, the devious dozen traits will engage with covert behaviours to get what they want, behaving like con artists that manipulate and cheat their way to achieve their desired outcome, where sadly being untruthful and vindictive, making empty promises, dishing out lopsided ultimatums and aggressive demands is the order of the day. And to the extreme, there is often no qualms about abusive and violent measures. As ugly as that is to comprehend, each one of us stands accused of acting inappropriately and crossing boundaries, where we can knowingly or unknowingly sabotage and abuse others to get what we desire. Of course, no war is ever fought without casualties, and it is the self and others that become the victims of our lower self traits.